So good afternoon. My name is Lauren Cooper, and I'm the lead of the Forest Carbon and Climate program at Michigan State University. We're so pleased to be leading the 2018-2019 Learning Exchange Series for the Forest Climate Working Group. And for those outside of the Forest Climate Working Group, I'd like to just provide a quick description of the group. The Forest Climate Working Group is a diverse group of forest interests, including landowners, industry, conservationists, academia, and those active in carbon markets. The group has worked together for 10 years to advocate for state and federal policies that work to ensure sustainable forest use and prevention of land use change. We have currently been in the process of reinvigorating our focus and activities, and we welcome inquiries into our work. And please reach out if you have any questions or you think your organization may be interested in joining. Here, I'm pleased to share our speaker lineup for the 2018-2019 year. We have a great series of speakers from a wide range of disciplines. These events happen on the first Wednesday of every month, or sometimes the second if we've landed too close to a holiday in the United States. And we do start and end right on the hour. We have the full lineup, including links to register on our website, so you can head over to the Forest Carbon and Climate program at Michigan State University, our website, and register for all the events. You'll get calendar invites, so you can select any that you're interested in or all of them and get them on your calendar now. And if you receive emails from the Forest Carbon and Climate program or the Forest Climate Working Group, then you are on the list and you'll receive some email invitations as well. Today we have, see if I can get to my next slide. Oh no. Let's see. So today we have a really great team coming to us from the Trust for Public Land, and they're going to be talking today about current topics and issues in domestic forest carbon policies and management approaches for a changing climate. We will have presentations from Breece Robertson, who's VP and Director for Research and Innovation at TPL, Emmalee Dolfi, Senior Manager of Enterprise Data Systems, and Fred Gifford, Director of Geospatial and Applied Analytics. We also have joining us Jad Daly, who's CEO and President of American Forests, and he'll be helping Breece to give a nice overview on the talk today. And so I'll hand it off to them whenever you're ready. Breece, feel free to share the screen or start your introduction.
Okay, let's see. All right.
Well, you know, Breece,
there we go. Can you?
Before you start, I forgot. Let me just say a couple of housekeeping notes here. We will save questions for all the speakers to the end. If you have questions in Zoom, you'll have a chat. If you can hover and find your menu bar, there's a chat function. Feel free to submit questions at any point there, and we'll collect them and send them along to the speakers at the end during our Q&A. Any unanswered questions will be collected into a Word document and posted on our website. And we are recording the session, and it will be available to view later on our website. We post it typically within a couple of days, as well as PDFs of the presentations. Okay, that's it. Thanks, Breece.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. It's good to be with everybody today. We're going to focus today on using big data to inform land conservation and park development that address climate change. And there's no time like now where it's really an urgent issue, as we all know. And data and technology can really play a big role in helping us be very strategic to address these issues. I think most of you probably are familiar with the Trust for Public Land. Just quickly, this is our mission. We're a national conservation and park development organization, and our mission is to create parks and protect lands for people, ensuring healthy, livable communities for generations to come. This is a map showing all of the park creation and conservation projects that we've completed across the country. So you can see the distribution of the work there, and that translates into these impacts. So we've created or protected over 5,500 places around the country. That equates to over 3 million acres protected. I think we're close to now over almost $80 billion worth of public funding that we've created or helped to support through ballot measures and through federal and state initiatives. And we also know that more than 8 million people live within a 10-minute walk of a place that the Trust for Public Land has protected. And I think, that's a really important a metric to call out, because we couldn't, we wouldn't know that measure if it weren't for technology like GIS technology that we can actually use to calculate the impacts of the work that we do on the communities where we work. And then speaking of impacts, though we had a few big defeats yesterday at the polls, like the carbon tax measure in Washington State and the drilling regulation in Colorado, both of those failed. But the good news is that 42 out of 51 park and conservation measures passed, and that generates over $2.8 billion in new funding for parks and open space and conservation. In Georgia, 83% of their voters supported the statewide outdoor amendment, and that's huge, in a state like Georgia. And then in Chaffee County, Colorado, they passed a measure which will support forest health and farmland protection. So we had a lot of great successes yesterday, really big impacts. We now have a lot of resources that we can use. We always like to say that blue plus red equals green. People really care about conservation and the health of their communities and the environments where they live, regardless of their party lines. They tend to vote green. We have, I think, over an 82% passage rate since 1992 on these local measures, and that's really great news for all of us who are working in this space. So, Chad, I'm going to pitch it over to you and let you introduce American Forests and talk a bit about big data and technology, the Climate Alliance, and how the election results support forests and carbon health.
Great, thanks so much, Breece. And I should note that prior to joining American Forests, I spent 10 years at the Trust for Public Land, where I had a front row seat to watch the way that Breece and her team, we called them the Department of Magic when I was at the Trust for Public Land, for the things they were able to do with data and technology, the questions they were able to answer for people with data and technology. And so just really excited to have them joining the Forest Climate Working Group webinar series and give people a better understanding of these fantastic tools that this team has created. But I want to laser in on sort of building on Breece's comment, the question of if we now have dollars to spend because of these measures that Breece talked about, these successful ballot measures. And by the way, that's just a small slice of the money that state and local governments and the federal government has to spend on land conservation and forest health and park development. The central question that we've been asking for a long time in the Forest Climate Working Group and that the Trust for Public Land has also been asking is, how would you apply those dollars to the projects that have the maximum uplift for climate change at the same time that they advance all these traditional goals that we've had for working forest economy and recreation opportunities and water supplies and wildlife habitat and things of that nature. And so I just want to offer some framing for today's presentation, something that we thought a lot about in the Forest Climate Working Group as a kind of an organizing principle for those questions, which is the concept of carbon offense and carbon defense. And most of the attention when people think about, for example, forests and climate change has gone on how can we use forests to pull even more carbon out of the atmosphere than they are already. And so the one number that you need to know if you're not familiar with this one is that right now, current levels in the U.S., our forests and forest products are capturing about 15% of our carbon emissions on an annual basis. It's a huge slug of carbon emissions that we're capturing and safely storing in forest and forest products. And so one of the questions that we want to ask is, where are there places that we can do more of that, where we can even grow that capacity to pull carbon out of the atmosphere, what sometimes people call negative emissions. And then there's another component of that carbon offense, which is the energy efficiency savings that we can get through forests. For example, in urban areas, using forests to reduce energy use by moderating urban environments, making them cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter. And there's amazing science from the Forest Service now that says that right now we're reducing energy use nationally by about 7.2%. In residences for heating and cooling as a result of strategic use of urban forest. And so how can we even grow that kind of offense opportunity, that energy savings opportunity through strategic deployment of urban forests? And there are other things in that category as well, like how to use forest products as a way to create more energy efficient building materials. But the part of this equation that we think is most often overlooked is in the category of carbon defense. And this ties to the reality that in many parts of the country, because of forest health and resilience challenges, things like exploding wildfire, greater loss of forest to pests and disease, we have greater emissions coming from forests. Very substantial increase in many areas of the country in emissions coming from forests. And so another kind of way to look at this equation is, where do we have the most carbon in forests right now that's at risk of being released? And so one of the tools that we're going to look at later today, the CarbonMap, is particularly helpful in figuring out where's there the most carbon now in forests, and where is that carbon most at risk from stressors like fire and forest health, but also from development, which is another thing that can release carbon and eliminate future sequestration. So I hope that's kind of helpful as a frame of reference as we go through this presentation. How do these different tools help us think about carbon offense opportunities and carbon defense opportunities? And the last thing I'd say is that we have a real-world example of how useful these tools are from this summer, when the Trust for Public Land and American Forests and a group of other organizations worked together with the 16 states of the U.S. Climate Alliance to ask those questions. Each of these states took a look at where were their carbon offense and carbon defense opportunities, from urban forests all the way out to their large landscapes. And they actually used an early prototype of the CarbonMap tool that you'll see later today, or in this presentation. And we're really excited about the insights that it started to give them about really targeting in where would they invest those dollars that they now have to work with in projects that do great work for climate change and also accomplish a lot of other objectives.
All right, thanks, Chad. You know, technology is advancing faster than ever, and I like to think about big data and big technology as helping all of us be better, faster, and stronger. And at the Trust for Public Land, our research and innovation group is defining the state of the art for our field and how we are using these new advances to solve problems faster, to drive better insights with what we would call non-traditional partners like school districts and healthcare providers, and to track progress against our mission. And we're doing this by leveraging artificial intelligence, like Microsoft's AI for Earth program, deep machine learning, feature recognition, using social media data to estimate usage of public lands, and combining all of these approaches with citizen science and crowdsourced information. So these are just a few examples on the screen here of what we're working on now. We're working with the University of Washington's Center for Creative Conservation to use different types of social media feeds to estimate park and public lands usage. We're consuming application data like from Strava. Some of you probably use that to track your biking and your running and compete against other people in doing that. But they're tracking your routes, and so we're able to use that information to really inform our planning processes. Emilee's going to talk about how we're using our optimized point methodology or location methodology to integrate where parks are needed most for things like urban heat, to reduce the urban heat island effect. And then also anonymized cell phone data to track park usage and routes. And so there's just a lot of different ways that we're using these big data, these big new emerging technologies to help drive insights into the work that we're doing. Again, you know, helping us be better, faster, stronger. So today we're going to focus on ParkServe and the CarbonMap, as Chad said. And so now I'd like to hand it over to Emmalee Dolfi to introduce you to ParkServe. So Emmalee, I think you need to share your screen.
Yep. There you go.
And I'll just say, as Emilee's teeing up here, you know, ParkServe came out of a bold goal that the Trust for Public Land has to make sure everybody living in cities across the country have access to a park within a 10-minute walk. And it grew out of something called ParkScore. But I don't want to steal your thunder, Emmalee, so I'll let you take it from here.
Perfect transition. Everybody can see the screen, I'm assuming. Please speak up if not. So to transition from Breece here, so the Trust for Public Land, the National Recreation and Park Association, and the Urban Land Institute are leading a nationwide movement to ensure there's a great park within a 10-minute walk of every person in every neighborhood in every city across America, called the 10-Minute Walk Campaign. And over 200 mayors have signed on to this campaign since its announcement in 2017. And ParkServe, the ParkServe data platform, which underwent its first full release in May of 2018, maps park locations and the 10-minute walk park access for nearly 14,000 communities across the US. It helps the mayors and cities develop a baseline for their 10-minute walk goals, but also provides information and data to city residents to help advocate for parks in their communities. And ParkServe provides municipalities with the following information, and I'll demo each of these. First, the percentage of residents living within a 10-minute walk of a park, along with several demographic breakdowns involving age, race, and ethnicity, and household income. Also, the total number of people living within a 10-minute walk of each individual park with those same demographic breakdowns. The areas of each community that need parks the most, and then also suggested locations within the community to build new parks that would have the biggest impact on the 10-minute walk in their community. And so I've randomly chosen Grand Rapids for my example. And so you can type any city of the 14,000, I'm assuming whichever one you choose is going to be in there. And you come first to the city profile page, which has some general facts about the park system of each of the communities. So in Grand Rapids, 75% of its residents live within a 10-minute walk of a park. There's around 100 parks that are publicly accessible within the city, around 1,500 acres. And then we also have some demographic comparisons down here as just kind of a basic look into this information about the park system. So just to decipher this quickly, children and adults are served better than seniors in the city. The white and the Asian population are the poorest served across race and ethnicity. And then in terms of household income, low income households are served better than both middle income and high income households. So pretty good in terms of the equitable lens there. If you click on this Dive Deep button for any of the cities, you would jump into our data platform, our mapping platform. And I'm going to go through each of the layers and each of the data that's represented here. But first, I'm just going to start with the light green areas and the grayish green areas. These are the parks and the 10-minute walk service areas. So first, for the city of Grand Rapids, if you click these down arrows, you can see the breakdown of the population within a 10-minute walk throughout the city. So a total of 150,000 people, which as I said was 75% of the city population, is served within a 10-minute walk of a park. There are several demographic breakdowns, race and ethnicity, age and income. You can hover over these bars to see what the percentage is, which matches the percentage on the original city profile page. You can also click on an individual park and get those same statistics for each park in the city. So Mary Waters Park serves 5,400 people with those same demographic breakdowns. And I don't want to spend too much time on that because I know you all are interested in some other good stuff. And then to go through the other layers. So these red and orange layers are the areas of park need, and they showcase areas outside, areas of the city outside of a 10-minute walk. So areas showing red are symbolized or are representative of very high park need in the city of Grand Rapids. And these areas have high population density, high density of young population, so 19 and younger, and or a high density of low income households. So it provides an equitable lens into the populations that are currently outside of a 10-minute walk. And then these blue points are representative of what we're calling optimized points. And there's two options here. The first, which is the only visible one right now, are the blue points. And those are areas of the city where building a park would have a biggest impact on the 10-minute walk. So it would increase the number of residents served within a 10-minute walk in the city if you were to build a park in these general locations. And then we also have, this is a new layer that's not yet publicly accessible, but will be in the coming weeks. These are optimized points that are in areas of high park need, but also a close proximity to an urban heat island. And so building a park here would have an impact on both the 10-minute walk, but also on urban heat island mitigation throughout the city. An additional layer that we will have available through the ParkServe platform, which will just be clickable in this window here, will be a national layer of urban heat islands. So you'd be able to turn that on in each of the communities to see what areas are heat islands and where a park can help mitigate the effects. We've also built some planning capabilities into the ParkServe platform. So if you want to tackle both urban heat islands and population living within a 10-minute walk, you can do so and see the impacts. And so if you look at both of these points, you can see that there's one of the blue points is in this red area, and also one of the red points is in two of the urban heat island points are in this area. So I'm going to choose that as a good location to see what a possible park would look like. So I'm just going to toggle around with these layers here real quick, so it's a little bit easier to see. So here's a current park, here's a current park. This is an area of park need. I'm zooming into here because it looks like it could potentially be a park. Not sure if anyone is familiar with the Grand Rapids area. Sorry if I'm very wrong. So you can draw a park polygon like so. Once you complete that polygon, click the Run Analysis button, and I've already run it, so I'm just going to skip to a new tab. And it will display the 10-minute walk service area for that park, and then also show you the population living within a 10-minute walk, which is the total, and then also the number of people that are currently outside of a 10-minute walk that this park would then serve. So this park serves a total of 1,600 people, 1,500 of which are not currently within a 10-minute walk of a park. And as we know, this park also has some climate impacts as well, if that is what you are after. So that's just a brief demo into what's currently in the ParkServe platform. But as Breece mentioned, we're really starting to look into, what's next. We have this huge data set. What can we do with it? First, I just want to talk about data sharing briefly. And on the ParkServe site, this was on October, we made the parks and 10-minute walk service areas publicly available. So if you are a GIS person or interested in playing around with the GIS data, you're able to download that through the ParkServe website, which is parkserve.tpl.org, and will be shared after this webinar. The data will also be added into USGS's Protected Areas database of the US, and that will likely be released in 2019 combined. I'm not super certain on that, but hopefully it's within next year. And then, that's just kind of what we're doing. There's the existing data, but now we're looking at how can we enrich the data, what can we do with the data at hand, but also what new data sets should we build that can help make this database that much more powerful. So for the first time, we can do national scale analyses of park need. We now know where all areas of park need are across the country. So maybe we want to look at what city or what urban area or metro area has the most people in need of a park. We can focus on the total number of people or approach the analysis with an equity lens and identify where the most low-income households are, not within a 10-minute walk, for example. We can also look in what areas of the countries do park need and urban heat islands have the strongest correlation. Where can we tackle, park access, climate change, and public health issues all at once? This database can help us look into that. And lastly, what cities have the most public schools in areas of park need? Joint use agreements between parks departments and school districts have proven to be a relatively simple way to improve 10-minute walk park access. So this data set's helping us figure out where we should target and where we can make the quickest impact. And so those, as I said, are examples of how we're using the data in hand. We're also looking to build and collect some more data and analyze data on park amenity location, park usage, and park quality through machine learning and crowdsourcing. Some examples are using drone imagery for object recognition, including improving our community engagement strategies to measure park quality, and then also investigating geolocated social media data as an indicator of park visitation. So with that, I'm going to close and thank you all for your attention, and I'll pass along to Fred.
Yeah, thanks so much, Fred. You can just hop in and grab the screen when you're ready.
All right, thanks, Emmalee. Yeah, and so as Emmalee mentioned, we're using national urban heat island data to inform some of our park analysis. One of the things that Trust for Public Land is doing right now is really extending a lot of our analysis out to the national level. And what I'm going to show you now is CarbonMap, and it's an example of another one of our national tools. And And you can think of it, it's another potential one that we'll use to do that enrichment of park data as we move forward for park analysis. But it also has other benefits as well, and so that's what I'm going to kind of show you right now. And does the screen look right to everybody?
I think you need to change your display. Just do a swap.
I'm not seeing the display control here.
Up at the top there.
Yep, if you hover up to the top, right above where it says CarbonMap on your slide.
There's display settings.
Here. Yep, do you see it's kind of small. Yep, just up a little further. Yeah, the display settings right there. Just bring your mouse up just a touch.
Okay, it's not going up any higher than that.
Oh, weird. Okay. Let's see here.
Let me see. Yeah. Pull that away. Okay, let me start up again. There we go.
There
okay. We go. All right. Okay. Here we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about CarbonMap. And first, to start with, what is it? So this is a joint project that the Trust for Public Land has been working with American Forest and JAD on for about the last year and a half. And it's a web mapping application where we're leveraging best available national data related to carbon storage and related issues and presenting that information in an easy to use tool. And so really the goals of CarbonMap are to really take scientific data, which, you know, there's a lot of, as all of you know, probably there's a lot of scientific information out there about carbon sequestration and its relationship to forests and other things, but it's highly technical. And so one of the things that we do at Trust for Public Land is try and take that technical data and translate it and interpret it in ways that it can be used to drive policy and decision making. And so that's what the goal of this project is, to allow policymakers and planners, the government agencies, nonprofits and foundations, you know, assess and differentiate different opportunities to protect and enhance carbon sequestration and carbon storage across the country. And then we also want to help organizations and individuals looking to make investments in carbon sequestration optimize those investments and then quantify the return on investment that they're getting. And so I'm going to go through some slides showing you where we're at with it right now, but where that is it's currently in a beta proof of concept version. And so that's one of the reasons why we're giving this presentation to you now, is we're interested in your input on it specifically. And at the end of my presentation, I'll give you the URL and the login information for the tool. We'd love for you to go in there and use it and then give us feedback on anything we can do to make it better. And so we're doing that right now. We're in the requirements review for it right now of the beta version, and we're expecting to release the initial version of it in the summer of 2019. So this is kind of the entry view for the CarbonMap application. And as you can see, what we're trying to do in this view is we're thinking at the national level and thinking if we're looking at existing carbon stocks, where are they occurring mostly across the U.S. And we're trying to give that visual indication by the darker green areas or the higher storage areas, and then also giving the list over on the right that's listing out that storage and giving the metric tons of carbon storage in each of those locations. And then if you also notice up here, we're looking at where that carbon storage is occurring on public lands in this view. But we can also look at it, for instance, in where it's occurring on private lands by clicking on the private tab. And so if you think about it, I mean, the types of policy recommendations and actions you might take could be significantly different whether you're trying to address carbon sequestration, carbon storage on public versus private land. And you can see the map. I'll go back up to show you the map changes quite a bit. You know, public lands mainly over in the west, and then we start thinking about it on private lands. It's the southeast and the upper Midwest. So quite a different view, and we can do that with all of the different data that I'm showing you, all the different issues that I'm going to show you that are in the tool right now. The next thing that we can look at after existing carbon stocks is we can look at threats to carbon sequestration. And so in this map, I'm looking at public threats from development to carbon sequestration. And you can see again, the southeast and the eastern seaboard are quite bright there. The other threats to carbon, it's threats to carbon storage actually. So development threats to carbon storage, insect and disease threats to carbon storage, and then also we can look at wildfire threats to carbon storage. In addition to those, we'd also like to add in, when we can, conversion of forest to ag land as another potential threat. And then finally, we can also see co-benefits of carbon storage and sequestration. And so in the case of co-benefits, we're looking at things like rare ecosystems, we're looking at source water protection, and we're looking at habitat cores. And again, we're symbolizing these things. We can symbolize them based on whether they're occurring on public lands, on private lands, and then we can look at the individual issues and get the priorities across the country. In addition to looking at all the data in there at that state level, we've also aggregated the data to the county level and then also to the parcel level. And so what we're looking at right now is at all the data, the existing carbon stocks on public lands in a national view for counties, but we can drill in to a finer resolution. So now we've clicked on the state of Oregon. And when we do that, we're zoomed into the state, and we've reprioritized the data now to look at if you're working in the state of Oregon, what would be your priority counties? And so it's showing you there, and then we could, if I was doing a live demo, I could click on the link down here, and we could see the list of the counties themselves. And by doing this, what we're doing is we're renormalizing, rescaling the data at the state level. So even if you're, for instance, in a state that is not one of the highest priority ones in the nation, you can still find out if you're doing climate policy, where would be the highest priority counties in your state to work in. And when we're down there at the state level, what we've also implemented is a lot of reporting. So starting at the state level and then down to the county and down to the parcel level, we also provide reporting tools. And so the reporting tools, again, the idea behind these are, we're trying to drive policy. We know that the policymakers themselves are probably not going to come and use this tool. It's going to be more planners and people like yourself. But how do you get the information out of the tool and share it with them in an easy and effective way? And the way we do that is through these reports. And so we have the reports at the state, county, and parcel level. And we're giving things like, we're also trying to equate the data to metrics that policymakers might be interested in. So for instance, what's the social value of the carbon and what's the total market value of the carbon, as well as just the things like the total metric tons of carbon storage and things like that. And we're also, if I was able to scroll down in this report, I'd be able to show the threats to carbon sequestration, carbon storage, and also the co-benefits that we're deriving at the state level. After the county level data, we're able to go down all the way to the parcel level. And so this parcel level data is when we start really getting into kind of what I think of as the big data analysis part of this project. We've loaded in parcel data for all the climate alliance states in the nation. And so if a few more join, we're really excited about that based on the last elections, and we'll add a few more states worth of data in here. And what we've done is we've taken the parcels, we've only looked at the parcels that are 100 acres and above across the country, but we've loaded them in and we've aggregated our data to them. And so you can generate, by clicking on one, you can get some of the basic information about it, both the owner and then some of the sequestration values on that parcel. And then if we clicked on the report, we'd get a similar report that we were looking at the state level. We'd get a similar report at the parcel level. And so again, this is when you're really getting down there to project-specific information. You're working with a landowner, you're working with a government agency and talking about the specific benefits that might be derived from some kind of policy implementation on a very specific geography. One of the other things that we're trying to do with a lot of our data too, we're taking the data, we're presenting a lot of times in a map format and geographic format, but we're also trying to provide infographics and other ways to interpret the data that aren't just geographic. And so in this case, we're giving some of those equivalence metrics, and we're looking at things like gallons of gasoline consumed, the equivalents for the existing carbon storage, vehicle miles driven, and then we're also presenting the different types of carbon storage that are happening. So is it above ground storage versus understory, that type of thing. So again, just trying to summarize and present the carbon storage information, carbon sequestration, and very easily to consume infographics and analytics. And so that's a very quick overview of the CarbonMap. If you want to access it yourself, you can go to this address and use this login information to get there. And again, we'd be really interested in hearing anything you have to say about it. And then also, if you want to see the ParkServe application that Emmalee was showing earlier, we have the address for it here. So that's what I have.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you so much to everyone. These are really interesting presentations, and we have a range of questions rolling in. So we can use the remainder of the time to bring some questions to you all, but I think some of them are clearly more towards one speaker than another, but I think it would be great if we could almost kind of treat it like a panel a little bit. If you have some overlap in your topic areas, I think it'd be of interest to the group as well. One of the, so I'm trying to put these in order here a little bit. I think one of the more overarching questions that we have are, how do you see these tools linking together, or is there any way to do so? Like, is there a way to bring more explicit carbon considerations into the parks software, or is that kind of on the radar, or could that inform city decision making as far as tree planting and carbon mitigation? I know you mentioned adaptation with urban heat index, but what's the conversation like in that, and is there any possibility of linking these tools at some point?
Yeah, I'll start with that one. This is Breece. You know, we've been thinking about that a lot, and how can we, you know, a lot of these applications, we're calling them targeted applications. You know, a lot of times we stand up applications to answer a set of questions or a specific question. And so how can we stand up these tools and these applications to be more like a platform, if you will? So a platform of all types of data and information, where we, you know, are loading information into the platform where we have that information, and then we're also linking out to other information that other organizations or agencies are managing from their own servers, and bringing those into a platform in a way that we can ask even more questions, you know, ask broader questions, get more information to answer the questions that we're asking, and to drive our insights. And so we have been thinking a lot about that, and specifically with the CarbonMap, you know, thinking about how we can turn that more into a platform that is reaching out into these other repositories of data that are out there. No, Fred, Chad, anything you want to add there?
I would throw in there that, yeah, we definitely are looking at how we do that integration and planning on. So for instance, one of the things that Trust for Public Land is looking at right now is we're interested in getting everybody within a 10-minute walk across the country to a urban park. And so one of the things that we need to be able to do to help sell that vision is quantify what the benefits are. And we see the benefits, some of the benefits being carbon sequestration, other climate-related issues. And the way we're going to be able to quantify those and demonstrate them are by integrating at a data level these two platforms, and then presenting the information again where it can be easily understood and interpreted by decision makers and funders in that case.
And this is Chad. I would just quickly add, I think urban heat island mitigation from our perspective is it's really equally a mitigation and adaptation strategy because of what I referenced earlier, the massive energy savings that we are currently getting from urban trees, and the potential to grow those by strategically deploying urban trees for urban heat island mitigation, which is absolutely a huge adaptation strategy because there are a lot of health risks being driven by heat islands. But there's also a lot of additional energy use being driven by heat islands as well. And so mitigating those is actually a really substantial opportunity for emissions reductions that we can accomplish through forests as well. So I think the two tools in that sense are really aligned in the overall goal of leveraging forests for mitigation.
That's a great point, Jad. And another question here, which I think that we just kind of answered, but I want to ask it as well because it's a nice, concise question, is what are the different carbon quantification tools used for larger scale, like at the forest or maybe parcel level, versus urban forestry at the smaller scale?
Fred, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so right now we're using, the tool is being, the backend databases are all the best available public information that we can find. And right now that's the Forest Service FIA carbon sequestration, carbon storage data. And so the tool right now, what we've done is we've aggregated that data to the parcel, to the county, state, and national level. And one of the things that we'd like to do with the tool is make it where we can also let people aggregate the data in an ad hoc way where they pick their geography. And so that's again, when we talk about requirements analysis, what we need to hear from people is that something they really need in the tool? You know, that they want to be able to see it at community forest or neighborhood level or some other level that we can't really anticipate going in and need to support kind of more ad hoc reporting out of the tool.
Thank you for that. And that answered another couple questions that we had about the source of data. So just to be clear, it's from FIA data now?
Yes, and I did see the other questions up there about Hawaii and Alaska.
Oh, yeah.
So the reason they're not in there is because they're not in the FIA database. And we very much are pursuing, you know, what our options are for either enhancing the FIA data or maybe even replacing it with a newer modeled database based on more current and higher resolution imagery than FIA is using. And it seems like that the requirements that we're hearing right now are driving us towards needing to do that. And so we're looking into it right now and figuring out what it would cost and how we would go about doing that new data development for carbon storage and sequestration potential.
And so I'm kind of sticking on the carbon tool since we do have a few questions there, and then I have a couple on the ParkServe tool. But we had also had a question on, could you then explain a little bit about how to use that tool to explore maybe carbon at a per acre basis? So would it be feasible or reasonable to make any comparisons, between locations within a state currently, and how would somebody go about doing that, and also between states?
Yeah, so within a state, what you're able to do is, and when I was showing the slides, for instance, when I was showing the state of Oregon, that comparison is already being done at the county level where it's comparing one county to another and it's ranking that. And so you can get that information and you can report out on it. And then the other thing that you could do within the tool is you could, at the parcel level, for instance, you could go down and click on a parcel and generate a report for it, and then generate a report for another parcel and kind of look at it manually and do that comparison. That's how it would happen right now. And again, if that's something that's important to be able to do that in a more interactive way, we'd love to hear about that and kind of what the use case is for it, and then we can help work with you to kind of envision how that capability could be integrated into the tool.
Thank you for that. So I'll kind of switch here to go back to the ParkServe. We had a question.
Yeah, can I just intervene one other?
Sorry.
I think there's some critical question farther down below I wanted to address because I think it's so important. Is that okay on the CarbonMap before we leave?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Oh, cool. Well, there were a lot of great questions, by the way, about the CarbonMap. I think one about metadata and the accessing the metadata, which I want to let Fred and Breece, if they want to answer that, because I think that's an easy one maybe to answer. But there was a question there about, okay, great, we've got this information there about, where is the carbon now and what are the risks of that carbon, kind of carbon defense guidance. What's the potential to add more data to this tool that's looking forward, like at reforestation opportunities and where we're getting the greatest sequestration, sort of forward-looking sequestration opportunities. And that is something that we're working on very actively to add more of those kinds of data into the tool. So very much we are going towards this being an offense and defense decision support tool. And so just for, that's a hold that space, but coming back with more of that kind of capacity in the near future.
Thanks for that, Jed. And so I'll repeat the question in case our other speakers have anything else to add to that as well, because it was asking about is there report or metadata associated with the CarbonMap that describe the method. So I don't know if there's a specific resource that you wanted to point anyone on the TPL team. Or a link that you could share as well. We can post that with the webinar materials afterwards, but I thought if you wanted to post that or bring that question to your attention.
Sure. So we do have that information, and I can send it to you, Lauren, and then you can send it out. And when we, right now, like I said, this is a beta version of the tool. When the tool goes live, then that information will be published side by side with the application itself. We always do that with all of our applications.
Great, thank you. So I guess we'll stay on the CarbonMap for one more question then. We also got a question here. Will the CarbonMap only cover standing stock or carbon sequestration rates as well? And then is there any consideration of non-forested land? Like, for example, that could implement a tree planting activity such as silvopasture in rangelands.
Yeah, that's what Jad was just getting at. We very much, that's on our radar to be able to look at sequestration potential and get that into the tool and fully integrated.
Okay. And so that's kind of a segue, because that was kind of a thought I had about the ParkServe tool, that it could show carbon storage potential in urban areas. And we did get a question about time series data for both ParkServe and the CarbonMap. Are there any time series data available for either of those tools?
So I can jump in first on ParkServe for that. There's nothing built in right now, but there's capability to do so. We're tracking kind of when new parks are being added to the database. And then we can, backtrack how cities are performing and how parks themselves are performing. One thing we're concentrating on right now specifically, though, is making sure the data is as accurate as possible on the ground, so that we can tell the difference between when a park has been in existence for 40 years but was just added to the ParkServe database versus a park that was created in November 2018. So that's our biggest focus right now is updating the database to make sure the baseline is as accurate as possible. But I agree, it'd be very powerful to have that time series component available.
Yeah, a little bit of a similar situation with CarbonMap. We don't have temporal data in there right now. It'd be really great to have some historic information, and that it'd be a fairly big lift to get that in there, honestly. And so we'd need to really talk through the requirements for that and the use to make sure we could justify doing it. But in addition to looking at past storage, we also definitely have on our mind scenario, like future projection type scenario analysis. And for instance, at given conversion rates, what are we looking at for 10 years out, 20 years out for carbon storage in different geographies, that type of thing.
And I do think too, just thinking about historical time series data and being able to analyze that, that there are a lot of data sets out there, especially satellite imagery, that again, we haven't been able to fully use and analyze because of just infrastructure and technology power. And so this new emerging technology that we're all getting into, the artificial intelligence and deep machine learning, I think can help us leverage some of that historic data in ways that we haven't been able to before, to look at that time series change.
And just one last piece here from Jad. I'm actually sitting here with me, and off camera is the Forest Climate Working Group's consultant, Dave Cleaves, who is the former climate advisor to the Chief of the Forest Service. Dave's been doing some amazing work digging into FIA data and doing some decadal analysis, looking backwards over the last almost 3 decades now, and has found some really important trend information that, while it's not at this point in a spatial format that would fit into the Carbon tool, I think it will answer some of the questions that folks have about, you know, where we are now relative to the trends that have gotten us to that point and what they might tell us about the future. So we're looking to find ways to publish this information and share it as a kind of a complementary analytic tool to the type of spatial information we can share in the CarbonMap.
Great, thank you for that. We have a couple of really more applied questions and sort of linking the real world and the tool. One question here is, how are controlled burns in our national forests handled in the tool? And they particularly point out eastern forests, and how does that contribute to emissions?
Breece and Fred, should I go ahead and take that one?
You take that one.
Okay, fair enough. So I'm going to actually just take that question in a slightly different direction. So there's a tremendous amount of work going on. Just so folks have the context here, emissions from fire have jumped dramatically. In fact, in one recent, from 1 year to the next, jumped over 100 million metric tons, just to give you a sense of scale. From a bad fire season to a horrific fire season, and we're going to see a lot of more of those kinds of massive emissions jumps from fire in the future. So how we manage forests to reduce fire risk is a huge part of the forest carbon equation going forward. And so mapping the kind of high risk areas, as the CarbonMap tool does, tells us where to go. But this question is getting at, well, what do we do in those places? Is it controlled burns? Is it hazardous fuels reduction? Is it a combination of those two techniques or other techniques that can reduce fire risk in forests and the intensity of fire? And the shortest answer that I want to give is that it depends very much in terms of the sort of emissions profile. As this question is asking about the East, very different from the East to the West, and even within the East, real differences from one forest type to another. So there isn't an easy blanket answer to give, but there's a lot of great analysis that shows that the short-term emissions increase that you might get from controlled burns in most of these contexts, and in some cases, the short spike in emissions that you might get from doing some, for example, thinning in these forests is made up and then some, and then by a lot, with the longer-term carbon gains that you get in reduced risk of catastrophic fire and overall wildfire emissions. So controlled burns definitely need to be a part of the toolbox for managing forests for reduced emissions from fire. And it's just a matter from each of these different forest types, one to the next, getting that optimized mix, using science to figure out what's the right amount of controlled fire and how to get the best benefit for forest health and the best benefit for emissions.
Thanks, Jad. That was a really excellent overview on the considerations there. And another follow-up question relatedly was, in utilizing this tool, the Carbon tool specifically, are national forests, and maybe Fred, do you know this, are national forests using this tool in their forest management plans? And they use the example of Ohio has one of the smallest national forests in the US, but seems to have a relatively aggressive logging or utilization plan. So wondering about how that balances with carbon estimates and valuing of carbon storage.
Yeah, to my knowledge, they're not. Like I said, the tool is still out in beta, really. And
right.
So, and we're doing that kind of stakeholder identification and requirements right now. And so that's the type of group that we're looking to identify and then, understand what their specific needs are for the tool. And, are we addressing them? And if not, can they be addressed?
Yeah, and I would only add that it's national forests are asking these questions, state forests are asking these questions, native and tribal forest managers, and many different folks who are managing on behalf of some governmental entity. And so as we think about this tool, it's potentially relevant for all of those folks. And I think, as Fred said accurately, that's part of what we need to determine in this requirements process. Who has this kind of capacity in one form or another already? For whom does this kind of fill a gap in their tools? And again, I'll just reinforce from this really fantastic 3-day workshop that we did, this learning lab that we did over the summer with the 16 states of the U.S. Climate Alliance. We got really positive feedback from those folks that this would be helpful for those states and how they think about the kind of management questions that you're asking about, for example, management of state lands.
Yeah, Jed, just to follow up, that was my first thought too, is you could really see the potential for this at the Learning Lab and the interest in the state teams. And I think over time, it'll be exciting to see how different states or different stakeholders use this tool, and it will give other stakeholders ideas of, oh, we could use this tool that way too, or this can answer questions for us as well. Another question that we had about the tool outputs, and I'll have this be the last question because we're almost on the hour here, is just a simple technical question. Is there a way to export parcel level data in Excel format from that tool?
Yeah, so that is not a capability that's in this tool, but we do have a lot of other parcel level decision support tools where we do have that capability. For the essentially tabular export of the data. And so again, it's just making sure that that's a requirement of the users of this tool before we start adding it in as capability here.
Okay, so that's something that is not currently available, but could be at some point in the future. Okay.
Yep.
So before we wrap up, are there any closing thoughts from our panelists before I kind of say thank you and wrap up here?
This is Breece. Thank you everybody for joining us. And as Fred said, and Emmalee too, these tools, we never think they're done. They're constantly in development. Of course, the data is too. And so any information that you have or requests or suggestions, we're really all ears. We want to hear what you need and how we can leverage these to the best of all of our abilities.
Well, great. Thank you very much to Breece, Fred, Jad, and Emmalee. We really appreciate the input. This was really informative, a lot to think about, and exciting to see new tools on the horizon and thinking about how this can shape decision making. Thank you to all of our guests for joining the webinar. Again, we will collect all the materials and process the video, and it will be available within a couple of days so you can share or access some of the links that we mentioned also. So we'll make sure we collect all this material for you. And with that, we'll wrap up. Please email. You can contact me at forestsc@msu.edu if you have any further questions or would like to sign up for our listserv and get more information. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you in the next webinar.